Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner, I'm going to go through a roll call. Commissioner Barlow? Lawrence here? Commissioner Bryant? Yes. Ian, yes. Susan Marie, yes. David, no. Kat, yes. Yes. Commissioner Sereno, yes. Miriam, yes. Just pass them over to the side, please. Thank you. The first thing on the agenda will be the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
Second, do I have any changes?
Yes, I have a motion to amend the agenda, to conduct an executive session following the public comment, to discuss contract negotiations, the premature disclosure of which would put the district at a substantial disadvantage.
Discussion?
I want to remind people to use their speak. Thank you.
All right, all those in favor of the motion to amend the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Unanimous. That will be noted as number 3.1. Thank you. Thank you. Next up is any comments and questions from the public? Seeing none, we will close that. Thank you. Do I need a motion to go after the motion?
Yes. We need a motion finding that the personnel matter is appropriate for executive session. First, we need a motion. First, we need to move that we are dealing with a matter that requires executive session.
Which we already
and
did
then-
when we amended amended the agenda.
No, that was a motion to amend the agenda. Joe said we need two motions
Doesn't
to
matter.
go
We'll
into
do it. It doesn't-
executive
it doesn't-
agenda.
Can I just clarify? So what we need is before going into executive session, you do it before you go into executive
that's fine. It
session.
doesn't matter.
And then you
Wait a
say,
minute.
do people agree with this reason?
So we have a motion to amend the, I'm sorry. We have a motion to go into executive session to discuss contract negotiations.
No,
Not
no,
now.
Right before we do it.
Not now, do it right before we do it.
but we are right now.
Oh, it's, okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I thought, I
that's
saw
why
it
was-
later down on the
No, we're on
agenda.
3.1.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So,
I thought it was like
we have a
last.
motion to go into executive session to discuss contract negotiations, the premature disclosure of which would put the district at a substantial disadvantage.
Wait,
We are, with number 3.1 on the agenda is the,
Well, clearly a number of people missed that, so we just need to slow down a little.
Just clarifying, we're going downstairs and doing.
we are, yes, we are.
But we have to move to agree that it's,
Right.
So do I have a motion to approve my motion to go into executive session?
well, point of, the first, before we can move to go into executive session, we need to make a motion that a personnel matter requires executive session. Joe McNeil says we need two motions.
Thought only if it wasn't warned within 24 hours, but we'll
No.
go with that. Okay,
No.
so,
I'll make the motion to go into executive session.
No.
why don't you make the motion?
I would,
That's all you have to do.
yes. I move that the fact of a personnel matter requires us to go into executive session in order to avoid negative consequences.
Second.
all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Unanimous?
Now we do the motion to go into executive.
Now, I'm going to go into contract negotiations, not for a personal matter, so I know that you just So we have a motion to go into executive session to discuss contract negotiations, premature disclosure of which would put the district at a substantial disadvantage. Do I have a motion to accept?
That was the original motion. So do you want to, probably need to, I don't know the
Well-
parliamentary piece about amending, but because you said personnel.
Just to clarify.
I thought you
the
said
revisions-
personnel.
The revisions to
3.1.
open meeting law in this last legislative session now require two separate motions. So what Susan was talking about is first you have to make a motion to establish that there's a legitimate reason to go into executive session. Then you make a motion
We
to
understood
actually
that.
go. So David actually just sponsored the motion to go into executive session.
You know,
But you can amend.
The problem is that there's a mismatch between the reason stated in
Yeah.
her motion and the wording in the
I'm sorry, I must have misheard.
personnel instead of contract negotiations.
I misheard Miriam. I thought you said personnel when you amended the, when you amended the agenda.
Contract negotiations.
Well, then I've covered item 12, so can I now move that contract negotiations are a legitimate reason for us to go into executive session?
I'll second it.
all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Have unanimous decision. Do I now have a motion to go into executive session to discuss contract negotiations for premature disclosure, which would put the district at a substantial disadvantage? I have a second. Commissioner Kirk. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Thank you. We're going to move on next to the board report, item 4. Item 4A, I do have a statement to make. The documentation provided in support of the O1 visa application for Yo Bang was insufficient to meet some of the eligibility criteria. The board will continue to execute its strategy to pursue O1 approval and other options available under U.S. immigration law to employ Yo Obang. We are continuing to work with Mr. Obang to collect documentation supporting an O1 approval. The board's appointment of Yo Obang was based on the determination that he is uniquely and highly qualified to meet the needs of our school district, and the board remains committed to ensuring that the school district will be able to benefit from his talents. The board expects a resolution prior to October 1st contract extension date in Mr. Obang's contract. Dr. Smith's contract as interim superintendent has been extended to cover whatever period of time is required between now and October 1st. Moving on to 4B, we have a motion to authorize the superintendent to designate 2 representatives to serve on the sick bank committee. Do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second. Discussion.
What does that mean?
A number of our collective bargaining agreements have provisions for a sick bank committee to review requests of individual employees to avail themselves of additional sick days that are in the bank. And we have to, the board is responsible for appointing 2 of the representatives on that committee, and that has historically been delegated to the superintendent to make those appointments on behalf of the board.
Further questions or discussion? Okay. I just want to make sure Bruce's done talking, that's all. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Motion passes unanimously.
Am I allowed to ask a couple of questions about 4A?
Not right now, I'm sorry.
All I want to know is if you're paying Yao Bang right now.
It's a point of order.
Yeah. We really just have to get through this, and there'll be people around after the, Dr. Smith will make himself available after the meeting. Let's just get through this agenda, okay? Thank you. The next item up is 4C, which is reflection on the board retreats. We have a few minutes to talk about how the first and the second retreats, and if anybody has anything to bring up.
I just found it incredibly useful.
particularly the first retreat, and reaching out to our administrators in the buildings and kind of drawing closer, I think needs to happen more often. It's great.
Commissioner Chena? You're done.
My time up already? You rigged it, didn't you? So, I always enjoy opportunities for professional development, and I appreciated, us having a space to do a little work around that, and I'm hoping that we can have more opportunities. I know that everyone's really busy, but it would be nice if we had some more opportunities to work on developing the culture of our group, as well as getting some professional development so that we can do even better at this role of school commissioner.
Thank you. Commissioner Curry?
I really appreciated the first retreat hearing from the principals and senior administrators, because I felt like we haven't had that opportunity before. When I first joined the board, a lot of the information was filtered solely through the superintendent and the board chair, and I felt like it was just nice to see the engagement that we have with the senior administrators and how not only seriously they take their jobs, but how thoughtful they've been and how energetic they are still after a very difficult year that they really stuck through. So I really appreciated that you did that, Howard, and thought that was well spent. I think, and then secondly, it was awesome to have Yao at the second meeting, because it gave him a chance to really kind of think proactively, so that when he's here, he's already kind of heard a lot of the ground we've covered. And so that was, both events were, I didn't know those things were going to happen. So part of me felt like, well, wait a minute, that's not the way it was supposed to be. But on the other hand, it turned out really nicely. I mean, I think in the future, we'll probably be a little more organized. It's just been a disorganized 18 months. And fortunately, I think what I kind of heard from everybody is that we're all still moving in the same direction, even if we haven't quite normalized. But generally, the overarching themes of equity, climate, culture, and financial stability still seem to be where people are putting our energies. So I just appreciate that everybody's still got our eyes on the prize.
Lauren?
Should at least say Commissioner Lauren. Yes, he is. I just want to affirm exactly what everybody else has said. I'm trying to. The first meeting was really helpful to me, and knowing all the principals and being able to see what was going on and hear about what was going on. The second retreat that we had last night, I really enjoyed it. And it may have been a little chaotic, but I feel like it's partly because we don't have that much opportunity to really talk to each other about what we're thinking about and what's going on. And I hope we get to do more. I think one a year is not nearly enough.
Anyone else?
Yeah. Yes. Well, like Lauren, I could just reiterate what other people have said. I thought that the opportunity for me to get to know the principals a little bit more at the first retreat was really useful and very important, just for us to get information. For those of us who have children in schools, we have a particular view of what's happening in the schools, and it's nice to augment that with more on-the-ground reports from the schools our kids don't go to, and I really appreciated that. I also really appreciated I've really appreciated the meetings we've had with more opportunity for conversation and processing. One of the things that I did last night was make a list of all of the different sorts of presentations of goals and strategies that have come forth, and realized that Yao's entry plan has 5 strategic directions and 5 focus areas. The planning committee came forward with 3 board goals. And then Liz shared with us the board goals from last year, which I think were 3, supplemented by numerous committee goals, which we also talked about. And then there's the district's diversity and equity plan, which has, I didn't go through to count, but it has many goals and excellent measures and sub-goals. And I think an area of professional development that might be very useful is more skill building about how we synthesize all of those things, because there's been a remarkable richness of cascading distillations of priorities, and I think there is a lot of common themes running through all of those, but I'm finding myself marveling at the richness of serial groupings of themes and priorities. So we have a lot of material to work with.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll close that. Moving on next to the superintendent's report, I'll turn it over to Dr. Smith.
Okay, just an update on the Murray Street property sale. We had reported earlier that we had an offer and accepted an offer on the property, and was actually at a price in excess of what had been the minimum bid price, so we were all excited about that. But the offer came with a number of conditions that we attempted to meet in terms of the certain modifications that would be made to the property before it was actually sold. Some of them, they made sense. There are a few minor repairs, which we were perfectly prepared to do and have actually since done anyhow. Others were more extensive and really out of the scope of what we felt was appropriate, or realtor felt would be appropriate as an accommodation attached to the offer. So we basically went through a process of trying to address every item we felt would be responsible for us to address, and took that back to the buyer. But at that point, they weren't interested in anything less than meeting all of the demands, some of which, again, seemed excessive. So the buyer withdrew their offer. So the property is back on the market, and it's actually benefiting from having gone through this process. So we fixed a few minor things, or a couple of electrical things and so forth, so we took care of. So we've taken some issues out of the equation at such time as we get another offer, and the realtor continues to be optimistic that that will happen, but right now that's the status of it. Just wanted to do an update on the kindergarten enrollment status, because I think there were some questions, or there was some information that came up as a product of our curriculum committee meeting that turned out to be a misreading of our data, and so we wanted to correct that. At a curriculum committee meeting, we were this last curriculum committee meeting, and it will be addressed as part of the report on the committee. But the topic was looking at support for kindergarten classrooms and how teachers and students in kindergarten classrooms could be supported. At that time, a number was introduced in the conversation that was purported representing the total number of students, kindergarten students registered for kindergarten, and it was a high number, and it struck me as being higher than any of the numbers that I was aware of. So I went back and checked, and it turns out the number that had been pulled from the data was the total number of children in that age group who are potentially eligible for kindergarten in the fall, not all of whom actually register for our schools. And so when you look at the number of students, go back to the number of students who are actually registered, which is like 302, our projection, the enrollment projection was 301, so it's right on track. It translates with 15 sections of kindergarten to an average class size of 20, which has been the norm in the district. Normally at this point in the summer, the number of incoming students would be offset by also a few late departures. It's a fluid time in the summer, families move, so we would not expect a significant increase in the overall registration number as a result. So I wanted to make sure we got that out there just to correct the records, because I think it would left the people with the impression that we were running up against some historically large kindergarten class sizes. We are not. We did have a very good discussion, and I can go back to that when we report on the minutes from that committee meeting. But I just wanted to correct that around the kindergarten enrollment picture, so it looks pretty much as projected. And then the last area, I just wanted to make reference a little bit to as a complement really to the previous conversation on the the board retreats, the goals that were the basis of that, and I'm not going to go through the whole list of goals. They'll be available on our website for people to look at them. But I think it's important to appreciate a little bit, and just to reiterate the process by which the goals were arrived at, and I'm really pleased with the level of, and I'm glad you picked up on it at the retreat, the level of investment of our administrators in these goals, because they are their goals. We looked at, we went through an exercise in which I've made reference to before. I just want to make reference to publicly, called coherence mapping, where that was facilitated. To your point, Susan and Maria, it's the beginning of a process that needs to continue in terms of sorting and synthesizing and so forth. But it was a good beginning and allowed us to start to put a more of a sense of order around some of our goals that we've been pursuing in recent years, and to organize them in clusters that made sense, and to kind of appreciate them in a more of a thematic way. And it turns out that, again, as you alluded to earlier, the themes that crystallized as a result of looking at all these were the kind of the fundamental themes that have come through in recent years in the goals of the district. So directionally, it's very consistent with what the district has been trying to do. I was particularly pleased, and I remarked to the group when we were working on this as an administrative team that a notable aspect of the goal development process that by their own reckoning, that would be, I said, this is one thing that would be different from someplace else. This was Burlington specific, because what they kept coming back to is the overriding, sort of the overarching theme. We were looking for sort of ways to graphically depict this, but the overarching theme, the single word that kept coming out was equity. And it seemed like it's sort of like the true north on the compass kind of thing, that they felt every time we look at something, we should be able to trace it back in one way or another as advancing, some principle related to equity. And the two basic categories that flowed for us out of that were, again, the whole area of curriculum instruction, which is an obvious one as a school district. It's what we do. But the other one, which received equal weight, was culture and climate. There's, I think, is very apparent. It's just a significant investment, and the goals reflect a lot of investment and commitment in those areas. And there's still, with the recognition that there's still a lot of work to be done. And we also, by the way, and just as a reminder in all these things, and this is, I mentioned this before, an area where I feel like I failed in what I was trying to help administrators. I was trying to give them permission to condense a little bit, just kind of create a little bit more manageable set of goals for you to hold yourselves accountable for, because I kept reminding them that you really shouldn't put yourself in a position of holding yourself accountable for things that you do not have the time or the resources to actually deliver on. It's great to say you need to do this, but then if you're challenged and you're struggling, and it turns out, well, it was a great goal, and yeah, we should have, or we could have, or we would have, we would like to, but we never really had the resources to do it justice in the first place. You kind of have to, do some reckoning there in terms of balancing what you're going to take on with the resources that are available. That said, they did take that to heart and look into the things that now represent our sort of slate of goals in each of the departments do reflect areas where our administrators feel invested, and where they feel committed to spending their time and energy, and where they feel that it can translate to measurable outcomes. And we need to turn our attention to sort of defining some of those outcomes in a little bit more measurable terms as a kind of a next step. But one guiding principle, I think, of that is that one of the ways that we have to, I think, as a preface, is with some of these goals, because they are ongoing, is what does good progress in 1 year look like? In other words, not hold it out there. You will complete this, and it'll be all wrapped up and tight, with a bow and done completely in 1 year. 1 year is an arbitrary time frame, particularly when you're tackling some tough issues. So I think in addition to sort of talking about measurable outcomes per se, it's measurable outcomes in the context of what constitutes good progress for 1 year. So that's where I think we need to turn our attention next, so that we can, and that's when you sort of do a reality check all right, with 1 year, with the resources available, we already have a budget. Those are the resources that have been defined for us. So within that context, what does good progress look like? But, you know, soup to nuts, there's something in here in just about every aspect that you would expect, you know, a district like ours to be addressing, and we'll post them on the website so that people can see them in more detail. And I'm really optimistic that because these came from them and represent things that they agree are important, and because even though they did that sort of independently, you know, as recently as last night, we had a chance to sort of re-examine them in the context of your own, from a board's perspective, kind of a recent historical areas of emphasis and commitment. There was a good deal of alignment, and I think that bodes well. So stop there.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Smith. Next up is the approval of the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Motion is unanimous. Next up is the report of the curriculum committee. Who will be reporting? Jean Marie?
I will do that, yes. We had a very robust meeting last week, and there's fairly detailed minutes available for your review, so I won't repeat all of that. But there was a number of guests at the meeting representing principals, kindergarten teachers, parents from multiple, I think from all the, maybe not from Flynn, virtually all the elementary schools had someone connected with them represented at the meeting. We suspended the rules so that we could have a more open discussion and really brainstormed all kinds of ways in which we could support kindergarten learners. Mark pointed out early in the discussion that we can control the scope of the curriculum to some degree, and we control budget. There's many other things we don't have a whole heck of a lot of control over. And the meeting was, I think, very remarkable because we didn't spend a lot of time interacting with the, you know, you all got many of the same emails about the need for support. We didn't spend a lot of time going back and forth about whether there was a need to support kindergartners, and simply proceeded from, okay, if we can do things differently, what could we do differently? And spent a portion of the meeting brainstorming all kinds of things, and then looped back around to look at what are some of the things that we think are doable or work-onable on a very short time frame with little to no money, given that we already have the budget set up for next year. And we ended the meeting with a nice list of who's going to do what on what time frame. I think we're looking forward to hearing more about the evolving plans for the literacy and math interventionists. There was some creative thinking about using some of the guidance psychologist supports, targeting them towards kindergarten in the first few weeks so that we could do some early assessments of student need early on. And, you know, we have a nice to-do list. I have gotten some, well, that's a separate matter. So.
Just a very short reflection on that. It was probably one of the best meetings I've ever, that was most fun, it sure was, because it was, anything was on the table. And Brian, we were all just blah, right? Everything came out. I don't think we could have missed anything with everybody sitting there. So it certainly was, the transparency to thinking was very open. So I really enjoyed that it was run that way. Any other discussion on the curriculum committee report?
The date did get changed, and so a couple people didn't know that the date had been changed, and so weren't able to attend.
Your microphone.
Oh, yes. The date had been changed, and so a couple people had not been informed that the meeting was happening. Just FYI in terms of informing people about date changes.
The meeting was warned.
Yes.
Next up, diversity and equity.
The minutes that are up are from the June meeting. We didn't have a meeting this month. It was supplanted by the curriculum committee, so our regular meeting will be next week. Oh, sorry. The minutes that are on board docs are from the previous meeting that had been omitted last time. We did not have a regular meeting this month. It was delayed because the curriculum committee took the diversity and equity slot, and our meeting will be next week.
Okay, and these are the meeting minutes that were missed in the last full board, right?
That's exactly right, and I discussed them at that time.
Thank you. Commissioner Curry, Policy and Governance.
I'll just highlight, at the last Policy and Governance Committee meeting, we had a presentation from the Boosters Club, and they are hoping to implement a fundraising plan that would involve, they raise money for the athletic program and the co-curricular activities, and they are interested in doing the kind of fundraising that other area schools do, which is more aggressive sales of advertising in some form. So we indicated to them that there is no policy on record for that, so we directed them to the superintendent and the director of finance and asked them to undertake a bunch of research about what other schools do, how they do it, and then meet with the administrative staff to discuss that. And then we will take our direction from the outcome of that meeting. Other than that, the minutes reflect our work. And there will be an item for this agenda regarding the student representative to the board, which is policy F28. I feel like I'm in an airport.
Do we have to do the first reading at this time?
Well, it's on the agenda later.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry, I saw it under this motion, this piece of the agenda, so it's going to go up later. Okay. Infrastructure and Technology Committee report. I'm sorry. Any discussion on policy and governance? Seeing none, we'll move on to,
Brian has his hand up.
That's why I had my hand raised.
sorry, I thought you were going to, go ahead, please.
This is the first reading of the policy.
No. That, the first reading of the policy is a different agenda item. I just did the Policy and Governance Committee report under reports.
I don't see a separate agenda item unless I'm missing it.
Neither do I.
Oh, I'm
It is,
sorry.
it's item 9.
That's what we're on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying, and so that's why I was
looking
bringing
at
it up
the
now.
minutes.
9A is the
Oh,
student rep.
Yeah, that's why I was raising my hand about it
Oh,
now.
thank you.
If I'm out of order, I can wait.
I have a really hard time following board doc agendas. I was looking at the minutes and thought we were just reporting on the committee meetings. Yeah.
So are we talking about it now?
So no, I guess I'll make a motion. So during the meeting, we realized that we were asked to look at a policy that was drafted in 2014 regarding student representation on the board. And I was on the policy committee back then and realized that it had been brought to that board at that time, and the minutes of June 2014 reflect that it was brought to the board at that time, but there was some glitch so that the policy was moved for first reading and then there was no action taken. So at this time, I'm making a motion to present the policy to the board to approve the first reading.
well, it's a motion from a committee, so it doesn't require a second. But if you want a second, I'll second.
So we discuss it now?
What's the procedure when it's a committee motion, when it's a,
I'm not familiar with
Well,
that.
the point of the second is to ensure that there's at least a modicum of support for discussing an item on the full agenda. So if something comes out of committee, the presumption is
Okay, so
that
we have
the
a-
committee thinks it's worth discussing, so you don't need a second for something that comes from a committee.
discussion?
This is why my hand was raised originally.
Commissioner Chena?
All right. So I don't know if this is the right space to get into an in-depth discussion about this policy. So my first question would be, if we have concerns about the policy, can we address it by attending one of your meetings? Or should I express my concern vaguely now?
Well, I'll just give you kind of a long answer, and I think it's kind of a choice. So the policy for passing policies is that typically they're referred to the full board for a first reading, and then if there's comments and questions, that typically goes back to that committee for discussion and modifications, and then the committee typically kicks it out again and presents it to the board for a second reading, and hopefully has addressed everything, and it can be adopted. That's one scenario. Another scenario might be that the questions and comments after first reading are so plentiful and complicated that the policy committee has to take a long, long time sorting those out. And then it may be a while before the policy comes back to the second reading, which may or may not work for people. In this case, I will just say that there is actually a student who has applied to be on the board. So the committee discussed a option that it would be great if the board would consider, which is that we go ahead and adopt this for now so that that student can get on the board. And then there's another policy that addresses board makeup in general. And one of our work goals for this year is alignment and consolidation of policies. And so if the board were to pass this policy and in fact even waive second reading, then our first task would actually be to consolidate both policies and align them. So we just have one board makeup policy. And in that case, we could integrate comments and questions about, if there are serious concerns or substantive concerns, we could address them in kind of the rewrite of the two policies and the merging into one.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Stoll.
Commissioner Chena, I would be interested in hearing your thoughts tonight, if you would be willing to share them.
I'm willing to share them. And out of respect for people's time, I could try to be brief. I've noticed that in my first term as a school commissioner, there were 2 student representatives attending almost every meeting. And then over the course of this school year, which was like the end of my first term, beginning of second term, their attendance has dwindled. And I'm wondering if the way that we have structured student involvement on the school board is disempowering for youth, and if it feels like it's not a meaningful way to be engaged. So I'm hesitant to just rubber stamp something that's been done over and over again if it's not a meaningful way that empowers young people to be part of their community. And I think that I'd like to have a discussion about what that is with students. Perhaps it looks like an election that they hold and it's not just adults deciding. Perhaps they actually have a vote on certain issues instead of not having an official vote, et cetera. Like, now's not the place to hash it out. But I've heard from some students that it doesn't seem like a meaningful way to be involved in the community. And judging by how the student attendance has been at meetings, and I guess I have questions about this, the way we structure student involvement with the school board. That's my brief, trying to be brief. Thanks.
Further discussion? Commissioner Laura?
I just want to say I agree with Brian's points and have the same concerns. We should really think about how we're going to use student representatives so it's not a tokenism kind of appointment.
Commissioner Harrington?
I just wanted to point out that from the minutes of June 2014, there was a concern raised at that time about whether the actual policy was conducive for encouraging more representation, and that board members requested the committee explore alternative process for students to get on the board rather than be selected by building administrators. So that's certainly a point that the committee could take up. I'd also say that I think the issue of how you get on the board is not necessarily the same question as how we structure student participation on the board, and the policy on how the student rep gets elected is probably not the place to take up that very important question. So I think I would hope we could find a broader way to think about student engagement.
Commissioner Snow, I think Commissioner Kirk afterwards.
So I wanted to just throw out an idea, which is there's the Student Innovation Seminar at the high school, which is...
I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. There's the Student Innovation Seminar at the high school, which is a class that does consultations. And Commissioner Giannoni and I used their services, they're like a consulting arm, during the superintendent search, and it was very helpful. So I'd just like to put out that however we move forward on this, that might be a way to create student involvement in talking about this topic. So.
Commissioner Kirk.
Does, I mean, in your policy, it says that the principal will select the candidate through a process. Is that process open to their interpretation on what they feel? Do we have, it doesn't say, it just says, I mean, at this point, the principal could go and pick any student and he or she chooses, instead of any student being actually allowed in. The process, it just says by the Burlington principals, the high school principal. Are we governing that at all, or is that really just up to them? Yes, it's just clarification, Liz.
The way I understand the policy was that it was written before I was on the board, so I don't really know what it was envisioned. The way I understand the actual procedures is that the procedures were developed in the high school, and it's not clear to me. What I know about it is that the principal either speaks with specific students that she has in mind and asks them if they'd like to fill out an application, and then she makes the decision. But that impression of mine could be completely wrong. I don't know.
Thank you.
Commissioner Judson.
Yep. My impression was that an announcement went out in school announcements saying if anyone is interested in being on the board, submit a letter of interest.
Commissioner Suino.
Speaking to the issue of how we structure student involvement, I mean, one thing that might be useful to do is to do some exit interviews with the student reps that have been on the board and ask them their thoughts on this. A second thought is, with regard even to the application process, is to meet with the student council. I think it would be great for school board members, the chair and whoever else, to meet with the student council, talk to them about the school board, and get their thoughts on what a useful application process would be. But I think that many students don't actually know what the school board does, and that's a great opportunity for us to engage with them. It doesn't address the issue of the application that we have now, but just to think about how to move forward on this.
Commissioner Porter, go right ahead. I'm sorry. I just wanted to weigh in on this just for a moment because, you know, I see the value of the student voice being forced. Because we talk about a lot of the things that they run into. We're trying to resolve these issues. And I don't know how to force that voice, or how that voice could feel more welcome in front of us, to feel that it matters. And yet we can sit here and we can obviously think that it would matter, right? Many of you, though, that are parents, you are getting that student voice already, whether you like it or not. I think that's a pretty fair assumption, right? But I would like to have the student representatives because I need their input, right? Not just listening. So that's just my thought. Commissioner Chena.
So after hearing what everybody said, I think there were some good ideas. I wouldn't want to exclude an interested student who has gone through an existing process from being part of our group. So I would lean towards, if approval of this policy fast meant a student who's interested and went through a process could be quickly connected with our group, then I would support moving forward with this. But I like the idea of delegating to the policy committee, and I'd be willing to help, even though I'm not on your committee if you need it. Not saying you can't do it, but if you wanted help, I'd be willing to help with this project because it's important to me. And I think Miriam's idea, I think Stephanie, you mentioned student council, right? I think Miriam's idea though, so the student council would be, if we have one, I didn't know if we had one or not at the school, at the high school at least. I know the other schools do because they sent delegations to our search interview, but that the idea of engaging students whose job it is, so to speak, to be consultants about solving problems, it might be interesting to approve this and get a student on, and then maybe as a project in the next school year, reach out to the student consultancy seminar, student innovation seminar, and see if student consultants might give us some feedback on this, and then with that, maybe that would lead us to reaching out to other student groups, like the student councils of different schools, et cetera. I know that in the superintendent search, when we put the call out for student involvement near the end of the search, we had such a huge turnout. I mean, there were like 60 or 70 students who showed up to the student interview, and it was my favorite interview. And it was really telling to see how the candidates handled themselves in that setting. So, and to get student feedback and to see the level of interest and detail and passion in their input forms. So I do think that there's a huge resource that we're missing out on if we're not engaging students more in our decision making. So I know that turned into a little speech. I didn't mean it to be, but I think you all get my point. So I guess in summary, my suggestion would be maybe we move forward with this to get a student on, and then put energy behind the idea of exploring a new and more meaningful way for students to be involved. Thank you.
So Commissioner Curry, correct me if I'm wrong, but the alternative to that would be to send it back to committee to initiate some of these suggestions that we've made?
Well, let me just say that I don't think it's an either or. So what I can tell you is that the way the policy committee works is that we don't necessarily generate new policies, but we review and refine and revise policies at the request of the community or the board. So in this particular case, this was an unfinished policy. It was just kind of caught mid, like across boards. So if the policy weren't passed tonight, what I can tell you is that the committee would have to put it in its queue, and that queue moves really slowly because we have already started other work. And so the idea of the committee actually going out and doing what everybody's asking, it would be the kind of thing that would probably take, the better part of a year, even with Brian's help. So if people want to have a student on the board, and that student might actually be a great candidate to help with some of this work, then the option would be to just move this policy forward the way it's written, and then the committee would take the board's request to revise it based on the findings of people who are interested in working on this particular issue. But just because the board wants something to happen doesn't mean the policy committee is going to just go off and do that, because we have other work we've already said we would do.
Can we put a student on the board with the existing policy?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I'm saying it's not an either or. That's what I said to begin with.
back.
To begin with, we can just waive the second reading, adopt this, get the student on the board, and then we can go into revising and consolidating alignment.
But we don't even have
Or,
to do that, right? I mean, the existing student policy.
We don't have
no,
an
this,
existing student policy.
well, we did, but this is a rewrite that was brought to the board in June of 2014, and it was never acted on.
Right.
So this is the one we need to act
What I'm
on.
saying is that even if we sent this back for amendments to be the perfect policy, we have an existing policy that we can use to bring two students that we've used because we've had two students here before. So something to put them on the board before.
Right.
Even though this could be being reworked but it's.
Right.
Approve it first and send it back for changes, and we can still put them on the board under the existing.
Well, we could. There is an existing policy.
It's not listed in the.
I know. There is, because we've had, for 2 boards now, we've had students on the board. So there is. We don't, I think what happened was there was some confusion about that, and this kind of got replaced. Okay. And so I actually haven't seen a copy of the original one. So I guess my preference for just ease of everything would be if we could just adopt this and be done with it and move on. And then we can do all the work that needs to be done to make it the vision that people have.
Commissioner Judson?
So we already have one application.
Yes.
Just go with it, right? What's holding us back from?
Well, we could just go with it, and we could ignore this, or we could just, this is a new and improved version of what existed before, so this is just kind of sitting in limbo. So we could just act on it, and then we'd have this on our policies and procedures, and then the committee could do the work of refining and changing.
Next year, we need someone, there's already someone who's requested to be on the board.
Right.
And that's not going to, this policy, as you were saying, is not going to get rewritten. It would take a year to get the feedback, to rewrite it.
Right, so I'm just suggesting that we adopt this and then have the student on the board right away.
Okay, so that's the stage right now, whether we adopt or
I'm just requesting that.
Commissioner Lauren?
Oh, I just wanted to say, I think it's a good idea for us to just adopt it and then reopen that question. And Brian offered to help, I want to offer to help too, with that process.
But I just reinforce on the, behalf of the student. I mean, again, we have a student who applied in good faith. I think engaging, we talk about meaningful engagement. Well, what's more meaningful than engaging this student and helping us to figure out what's relevant engagement? Let's start somewhere with getting a student who's actually here to do that. So I would, I would encourage you to move forward so that we can bring this student to the August meeting for appointment to the board.
Liz, what do you need?
People need to waive the second reading and adopt this policy as written.
Well, there's a motion on the floor now for the first reading.
So we could amend them. So could someone amend the motion?
Kat's got a question.
Can't amend a motion after discussion.
I just wanted to know how different this is from the original. If you've read, I mean, it can't be that much
I don't know,
different.
because someone took the original off the website, so I don't know what it looks like.
Okay, so, yeah, it can't be that much different, I would think.
So we have a motion to accept on the first reading. Am I correct? That's what's sitting on the table right now?
Well, can I move to amend the motion to simply accept the policy?
You can move to
Waive the
waive,
second reading.
you can move to waive the first and second, and we'll have to act on that before we go back and act on the original. You can move to do a friendly, of which we'd have to act upon, and then we have to go back and vote on the original.
Well, no, if the amendment is approved, then you vote on the amended motion.
I don't think that's true, but we can certainly, we know what the idea is here, so I'm fine, let's,
Why don't you withdraw your motion, Liz, and
Sure.
just make a new one?
I'd like to withdraw my motion. I'd like to move that the board waive the first and second reading of policy F28, student representatives on the school board, and adopt the policy as written.
Seconded.
all those in favor, please say aye.
Get to have a discussion now about it.
We certainly can do another discussion, Brian, yes, we can.
So, I will support this, but I'm supporting it. I know we can't attach anything to it, but I'm supporting it in the spirit that we are going to not let this fall to the wayside, and that once we have a student representative on the board, that somehow we delegate this work to someone, to some group, to engage with the student representative, and then hopefully beyond to the student body, so that we can have more meaningful student involvement on the school board. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
I think Lauren recommended you.
Any further discussion? Lauren?
No, I just want to say I completely agree with that.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Motion passes unanimously.
Raised against.
Oh, well, there was one against. Thank you. Policy and Governance, are you all set?
Yes, thank you.
Infrastructure and Technology Committee report.
All right. Most of what we've done is on the minutes. The district seems very excited about the Verizon initiative to get iPads into the middle schools and changing things. And the only other thing that we got going on is I got word from Marty Spalding on the Edmonds update that it's going a little slower, but we're still within contingencies, and things are going okay. Just they found some unexpected problems with this old building, so.
It was with the stairwell in particular.
Yeah,
that,
the concrete in the
yeah.
stairwells.
But just as a report I got today indicated that because of what they learned in the first one and the way they will go at the second one, that will address any timing concerns.
Right, they're gonna add manpower. Absolutely. That's the letter I got from Marty today.
Any discussion for ITC? Moving on, Finance Committee.
I would direct people to our minutes. I would just quickly say that fiscal year 15 is over. It closed out at the end of June. So the district is now finishing up their projections, and at our next Finance Committee meeting, we will be getting an overview of how the district ended the year. This is unaudited. People need to keep that in mind, but we should expect something then. The next thing we talked about is the fiscal 16 budget, and again, the administration is working hard on that, and our finance director said that hopefully as soon as we have gotten the line item budget a little bit more solidified, we will be posting it on board docs so that the public can see. So we're looking forward to having that. And then the last thing I just wanted to say that the legal services, we put out an RFP to get legal services. We need to do it every 3 years. So at our Finance Committee meeting coming up this month, the group of people who were on that committee reviewing the RFPs will be presenting to the Finance Committee a recommendation. The Finance Committee will hopefully approve that recommendation or have a discussion about it, and then we brought to the full board at our next board meeting for approval. And that's, just one other thing I guess I would just bring up. It's in our minutes, but one of the issues that the Finance Committee discussed was pensions. Pensions cost the district a lot of money. It's not something that we have discussed before since I've been on the board, so we asked for a little bit more information about how we're funding our pensions, what kind of liabilities we have out there. The city has been doing the same, so this seemed like an opportune time for us to start to understand more about our own pension liabilities. So we'll be looking into that going forward.
Thank you. The recommendations that you're going to be coming to the recommendation that you're going to be coming to the board with regarding.
Mark. Can't hear you.
I'm sorry. The recommendation that you're going to be coming to the full board with regarding legal counsel, are we going to have any preemptive way to take a look at that ahead of time, or somehow just educate ourselves as to?
Well, at our Finance Committee meeting, anyone who's interested can come, and there will be the committee's recommendation to the Finance Committee, so there will probably be a supporting document with that people can look at. For those of you that are not familiar, we sent out an RFP for legal services and also for assistance with negotiating and collective bargaining, and we sent them out as sort of two separate we have the opportunity to look at those two issues separately. That's how the administration structured the RFPs. So I would encourage anyone to go ahead and look at the agenda for the finance meeting to get background information for that.
Thank you. So we all good for that? So that I just want to make sure that we're ready for this when it comes in August. Good. Commissioner Chena.
Can you remind everyone when the next Finance Committee meeting is, in case people are interested in coming?
Yes, it's the 4th Tuesday of the month. So what is that, the 20th?
It's the 28th this month.
Thank you, 28th at 7 o'clock. And I did mention at the retreat, and I will reiterate here, one of the elements that we hope to do at that committee is Commissioner Kirk and I have talked about trying to collaborate a bit more with ITC and Finance. So I'm going to extend a special invitation to all the ITC folks. If you can possibly attend, that would be great. But of course, everyone is also invited.
That's actually one of our That's going to
Can you
be,
use your mic?
that'll be one of our agenda items, actually, on our meeting on the 21st, is the collaboration with finance. It's actually going to be on the agenda, so, because we both are in the same bucket for spending money. We're both digging in the same pot.
Any other discussion for the Finance Committee? Okay, closing that out. Do we have any other discussion? Not yet. Commissioner Kirk? No. Oh, thank you. So the hand go up. So I do need to make something. So I do apologize if I've been short with people or I should not have been, and it's inexcusable, and I'll certainly work on that. I'm sure Commissioner Chino will make sure that I get training on that. And then he'll crack me the whip, but I do apologize. It's uncalled for, and none of you deserved it, so I do apologize for that. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. I was letting someone else go first.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.